Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy Greco, retired Justice of the New York State Supreme Court. Finland is a cold, dark country, but the Finns themselves are sunny and warm people. Maybe it's because of the adverse conditions they go out of their way to be sunny and warm. And Greta was a big, jolly Finnish lady who looked like something out of a Wagnerian opera heroine, you know? All she needed was the Viking horns and the helmet, and she could have fit right in, blonde. But she was jolly. She was sweet and just the nicest kind of a person. And my mother befriended her because although she was in her 60s, she was still working, and she was working as a cleaning lady for our next door neighbor in an attached house next door to my mother's house. And my mother, over the years, became friendly with Greta, and there was no doubt why. Greta was just a charming, lovely person and very, very sweet. Well, my mother volunteered me. Greta was having trouble with her husband, who was a lemon in the garden of love, as we say. He was abusive. He was a drunk. He was retired, but he wasn't giving her any money. And he had a pension, and now he had another job working as a chief. He was a pretty good mechanic. He was a chief handyman in a large garden apartment development in Queens. Well, he wouldn't give her any money to run the house. He criticized her. He abused her. He smacked her around, and emotionally he abused her to the point where even Greta, with her forgiving and gracious personality, had enough. She wanted out. She wanted a divorce. So my mother, hearing she had no money and she needed a divorce, immediately that qualified her for my mother's legal aid list. And she calls me up and she said, okay, you have to help Greta. And I knew better than to refuse my mother's assignments here, you know. My mother was easy, always ready to assign me to a case that she thought was worthy, you know. But I had to do the work, of course, you know. But I met Greta, and she was charming, and I knew her just casually. And so speaking to her, I was just that much more impressed. She was very sweet, very modest, low-key. And she said she had this high-pitched sing-song voice, and she said all she wanted was the old car. They had two cars. They had a new car and an old car. She wanted the old car and just enough money to pay the rent and buy groceries. She wasn't one of these, potential divorcees who wanted the husband's head on and heart on a platter, you know. She was very, very gracious and very nice. She also said he was working. He had made a nice salary as a handyman, and he had a nice pension, and he also made a couple of solo trips to the old country. He went to Finland carrying money over there. So apparently this guy had a long-term plan of some sort or another, you could deduce from his conduct. Well, I eventually served him. I had him served with a summons and complaint in the divorce matter. And he got on the phone and called my office, and he was all angry and this, that, and the other thing is not the, you know. And I calmly and simply said, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. I advise you to get a lawyer and to get one soon. You'll be better off. I'll talk to your lawyer. Sure enough, he got a lawyer, and I didn't know. It was a local guy who answered the papers, and I checked him out, and I found out that this local guy, whom I didn't know, was a matrimonial specialist. It's all pretty much he did was matrimonial. And not only that, but mostly he defended husbands. So I said, I'm going to have my hands full here. This guy knows what he's about. I haven't done any of this stuff. I'm practicing law for 1 year. I'm still wet behind the ears. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And especially not in, any particular circumstance. If it's going to be contested, this is going to be tough. So I know, where's my mother when I need her now, you know? Okay. The guy was brusque, and he was rude on the phone and everything else. And a couple of months go by, and we have to appear in Special Term 5, which is the matrimonial pretrial part where you have motions, different requests to go back and forth, and then you have to you end up setting a trial date. So I went there, and the place is filled up, and this guy is there, and I didn't even know who it was until I heard his name called out on another case by another lawyer, an elderly man in his 80s, a frail old guy had called his name, and this guy gets up, my adversary gets up, and walks to the old guy, and the old guy gives him papers on their case, and he takes the papers and throws them in the old man's face. And the old man was half his size. This guy was about in his mid-50s, but he looked like an NFL guard. He was a big, strong, hefty guy, and nasty to that old man. Well, I held back on my own instincts, but I made a mental note of it because I hate bullies. I just put that in the back of my brain. I said, this guy is a bad bully. Well, then my case was called, our case, and this guy, like a typical bully, he picked his spots. He knew I was a young guy. He wasn't picking on me. He wasn't polite. He was rude. He was brusque, but that's it. So I handed him the papers. He handed me papers which included a report, an affidavit setting out the husband's finances and his financial status, which the husband signed. It's under oath, and this lawyer notarized. Okay, fine. 1 month later comes the trial date. Now I'm wet behind the ears, and I show up at the trial court with Greta, and we're waiting in the hallway. And my adversary is almost nowhere to be found. He's walking back and forth in other matrimonial parts, and nobody calls the case. And we're out there waiting, and he's not giving me any explanation. And the judge keeps us out there waiting, and we waited for 3 days in that hallway. And when I didn't see the husband, on the first day, after the first day, the second day and the third day, I knew something was up. I said, this guy knows something I don't know because he's not even bringing in his client. And I figured something was wrong. Well, I thought, this guy's taking advantage. He's trying to win a war of attrition. He's wearing us down. He's going to wear Greta down. He's going to wear me down. We're going to get disgusted, and we're going to be a little weak, and we'll be amenable to, whatever bones he decides to throw our way. So I have advantages here. And all I'm doing is getting more and more resolved and getting, angrier and angrier, but in a controlled way. My advantage is I'm a young guy. I'm broke. I have plenty of time on my hands. I have nowhere to go. Plus, at Greta's advice, I went to his place where he's employed. And I had a subpoena in hand for his pay records and everything else. When they saw the subpoena, they capitulated. They said, "What do you want? We don't want to go to court. We're not going to fight. What do you need?" I said, "I need his, documentation that he works here, what his position is, what his salary is, and some paychecks." And sure enough, they rattled everything off and handed me a fistful of papers and pretty incriminating documentary evidence that I have. Now, that's my ace in the hole, so I have advantages. The other guy doesn't know it. I know what I'm up against. This guy is a bad guy, but he doesn't know me at all, and he thinks I'm, and rightfully so, I'm wet behind the ears, and he's gonna take advantage and blow it by me. Well, the trial starts. It's a bench trial, which means there's no jury. The judge is going to be the arbiter of the facts, the judge of the facts, and the law. And the judge, as it happens, whom I am starting to think this judge is trying to help this guy out. Maybe because he's a regular matrimonial practitioner and the judge only handles matrimonial things and they could get friendly over the years and, they're familiar. And I've never been there before. But this judge, while he doesn't really know me personally, he knows that my family and he have mutual friends. So I'm thinking, all things considered, I'll be treated fairly. I'm not in too bad a place, even though this guy might be leaning in favor of the husband's lawyer. The trial starts, and I put Greta on the stand, and she does a great job, even under cross-examination, because she's telling the truth. She's sweet. She's not got no axe to grind. She's a perfect witness. She does very, very well. Now, I call the husband as my witness. Why? Because he's a defendant. He doesn't have to prove anything. We're the plaintiffs and we have to prove the case. And if I only put the wife on, the other lawyer might not put this guy on the stand at all, and I'll have no chance to cross-examine him or confront him with any of the evidence or anything else. So it's a good idea for me to call him as my own witness. But because I call him as my own witness, I'm basically vouching for his credibility. So I can't cross-examine him or anything. But I do finally ask him questions, and he's hostile. He's nasty. So I asked the judge for a ruling that he's a hostile witness, which would allow me to question him with leading questions where, the answer is right in the question and yes, no stuff. And the judge, again, trying to help the other lawyer, I guess, he says, no, that's not necessary. There's no jury here. I don't have to declare him a hostile witness, but I'll give you leeway in how you form your questions so that you can get the answers that you need and let this man answer. So I did. And now it got hot and heavy because I confronted him about his work. And I showed him the report. And nowhere on that report that he handed in, signed with his name, notarized by his lawyer, is that job as a handyman. Now I got him and I confront him with the checks and the proof and the pay records and everything else from the company. And he's totally wrecked. This guy is a total wreck. I said, why? You're not telling the truth. Why did you hold us back? Who made this report? He says, I didn't make the report. My lawyer made the report, and he told me to sign it, and then he notarized it. Well, first of all, I got him on perjury because he's lying about his job in a sworn statement. And now he's got the lawyer on the record for suborning perjury. The lawyer jumps up out of his chair and runs across the courtroom to me to try to attack me. The court officers intercepted him. The guy was speaking in tongues. He was so aggravated. He said, and now he's screaming, I want to make a statement. He's telling the judge, I want to make a statement. The husband is so shook up, he asked for a drink of water, and they gave him a drink of water. Court officers brought him a little cup of water, and he looked like Don Knotts. He couldn't hold the water. Don Knotts was the comedian who played Barney Fife in Mayberry RFD with Andy Griffith, the nervous comedian. And he couldn't hold the water, and he spilled it all in his lap. It was hilarious, to watch this guy because it was not my witness. It's the other guy's party now. And I got him. This is like a Perry Mason moment. This doesn't happen. It happens on Perry Mason, but this doesn't happen in real life. These people lie. We call it tester lying. They get up there and lie and look you right in the eye and, no problem. They lie right to your face. Well, anyway, this guy's lying. Now the lawyer is yelling, I want to make a statement. I want to make a statement to, quote unquote, clarify the record. Well, when the lawyer wants to make a statement, there's two ways to do it. He can make a statement, but he has to have the consent of his adversary. That's me. Well, he's not getting my consent, not after the way he treated me. The other option is I can insist that he take the stand, be sworn in by the judge as a witness, and testify under oath. So now I could cross-examine him. He's not my witness. And if he lies, he's subject to further perjury charges, which are criminal charges now. Well, he's ballistic again. He tries to attack me. And again, the court officers restrain him. This is too good to be true, I'm loving this. Well, the judge, trying to quell the situation, looks at me and he goes, do you have any more questions of the witness? He said, all right, just sit down, he tells the lawyer, because and he knew better than to ask me twice if I wanted, I would give my consent, because he knew I wasn't going to give my consent under these circumstances. So he tells the guy to sit down, the other lawyer sits down. Judge says, all right, counsel, you have any more questions of this witness? I said, no. He says, all right, you can get up. So, and by the way, Perry Mason, this guy couldn't get up out of the chair without help from the court officers. He was totally obliterated, I'd never done that before or since with a witness, but this was good. Greta, meanwhile, the poor thing's smiling for the first time in her life because her husband is getting abused, and his lawyer is a nice retribution for all of this. Well, we go out and we come back after recess and we give summations. And the summations are cut and dried. It's a bench trial. It's just a judge. There's no histrionics. There's nothing. It's matter-of-fact stuff. The judge is not going to listen to any drama. He don't want to hear this stuff. He's been doing it, for 20 years. He doesn't want to hear that. So we do, and I sum up. And I have a great case. I'm a lock here. I've got them lying, him and the lawyer, both of them. Well, the judge says, I reserve decision. I walk out into the hallway with Greta, and out comes my bully friend, and he's totally subdued now. He's got tears in his eyes, and he says, why were you so mean to me in there? I says, oh, was I mean to you? I says, oh, let me think. Maybe it had something to do with last month when we were in Special 5. You remember that old man handed you the papers and you threw them back in his face? I said, you want to be a tough guy. And he was shocked. He was shocked that I remembered. I said, you remember that poor old guy you threw you're a tough guy. I said, well, where I come from, tough guys can give it out, but they also have to be able to take it. And you, mister, can't take it, obviously. Maybe you should try being a nice guy once in a while. That might work better because you're not built really to be a tough guy where I come from. And I knew that speech, it made me feel good, but it wasn't going to work on this crocodile. I wasn't changing him. This guy was a crocodile. He was nasty. Well, he went back into the courtroom. I'm standing there. Greta is quelling. She's she's loving this, a big smile on her face. Minutes later, just 5 minutes, and I'm putting my files together and getting stuff together, and I'm out in the hallway with Greta, and we're figuring out, when I'm going to get the decision. I'll call her, et cetera, et cetera. Out comes my adversary. And he said, the judge just decided the case in a nice, low, phony, humble voice. He decided judgment for the defendant, the husband. And he says, well, I guess that's it. And it's like false humility he was saying this. I said, no, 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 my friend, that's not it. What do you mean? I says, no, no, no. I know what happened here in this courtroom today. You know what happened here in this courtroom today, and that judge knows what happened here in this courtroom today. I'm going to file an appeal. And he said, well, who's going to pay? I'm paying for it myself, and I'll do it free. I'll do it pro bono, free for this woman. And now the appellate division of the Supreme Court, when they read the record, they're going to know what happened here today. And you tell the judge I said good luck to him. And he went right back in the courtroom, and I left with Greta. 2 hours later, my friend the bully's on the phone. Mr. Humility here. He's all good. We can settle. Can we settle this case? I think, this has gone far enough. Oh, yeah, no kidding. It's gone far enough. We settled the case in 2 hours. In 2 hours after the verdict, we settled the case on the phone for twice our demands. I doubled everything for aggravation and everything else that this guy did. I doubled everything up. Well, my mother was happy. I lost all respect for that judge. As for the bully, well, revenge is a dish that tastes best when it's cold, And as for Greta, she thanked me in the most wonderful sing-song Finnish dialect. She was so happy. She was hugging me. She was practically singing her thanks. So I guess the fat lady was singing. And that's the end of that case. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, lessons they don't teach in law school. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.